Hi guys, I'm Mai-Linh Dovan, certified athletic therapist and founder of Rehab-U Movement and Performance Therapy. This is part 2 of our capsule on rehabbing the throwing elbow. So I'm with Matt again, and I want to go through some of the stuff that we do typically structurally for the elbow. So I mentioned in the first capsule that the first 4 to 6 weeks post-surgery are really about recovering from the surgery and recovering range of motion and all that kind of stuff. And we went through other elements throughout the kinetic chain that we need to assess during that period to make sure that when Matt returns to throwing, he's not getting excessive valgus stress at that elbow. That being said, there's always a way to optimize what we typically do within the rehab process for the elbow. For example, we're going to do a lot of mobility work, making sure that Matt gets his extension back, that kind of stuff. He's done a really great job of that. He's got good extension. What I find is always important is to get athletes to do some homework at home. And obviously they're going to be like soft tissue stuff in the forearms because he's a little bit limited in his wrist range of motion initially and all that kind of stuff. And in clinic you can do, manual therapy on that kind of stuff, but I like to give athletes homework. So one of the things that we would do in the mobilization sequence for Matt is give him tendon glide exercises. And now these exercises are interesting because they will mobilize the soft tissue, right? And they're also going to increase circulation. So they're all kind of things that the elbow needs right now. And that movement is also like analgesic. And it's very interesting to get all those tissues moving and reintegrate that function through the forearm. So Matt's going to show what those tendon glide exercises are like. So he wants to have the elbow supported and he's going to keep the wrist neutral the whole time, flexing the fingers and then fingers into the hand. So that's the first one. Just do a couple, Matt. Hey guys, thanks for watching our videos and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now he would do essentially about 8 of those, and then the second one that he'll do is go with straight fingers, and same thing, always keeping the wrist neutral and then fingers into the hand. Excellent. So those are exercises that he can do on his own that will help mobilize those tissues. All right. The other thing that we typically find in elbow rehab is all of the wrist flexion, extension, elbow flexion, extension exercises, usually starting with sub-painful, sub-maximal isometrics, and then we progressively move into isotonics, right? So things like doing bicep curls, so elbow flexion exercises are going to be super important because those muscles cross the elbow joint and are important for strengthening the joint. The one thing that we should keep in mind as well though is we're trying to establish like a solid structure, and what we need to go back to is our hypertrophy elements, right? We're trying to strengthen the structure essentially, so let's make sure that we do things under control. So a lot of the times these exercises are prescribed as 3 sets of 10, correct me if I'm wrong, that might be what you kind of got. So 3 sets of 10 with very little attention to tempo, for example. Now what we want is we want time under tension so we can stimulate hypertrophy. We also want slow eccentrics so we can work on deceleration, which is going to be an important part as we get more and more specific in his rehab to recreating the stresses of throwing. So for example, if he was just doing a bicep curl, I would make sure that I have him do a very slow eccentric, so down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then up, right? So that will increase the time under tension for the number of repetitions that I'm doing. So he might have like a 2-second concentric with a 5-second eccentric with 1-second pause at the end of the eccentric and the concentric for his 10 reps, which increases that time under tension. So at least we're in hypertrophy parameters. We're addressing strengthening the structure, all right? So that's the kind of stuff that we would have in his activation phase, for example. Now, if we move to integration, again, we want to start slowly preparing not just the elbow, but also the shoulder for what it's going to be like to accelerate and decelerate, so what that throwing motion is going to require. And PNF patterns are really great for this. So with PNF patterns, what we want is, so you're going to do palm facing back for this one initially. So grab it like that, yeah. With PNF patterns, the most important cue to give the athlete is lead with the thumb, because there's always a rotational component and he needs to start with that rotational component. So he starts up, palm facing back, turn a little bit at the top, yeah. And then he drives with the thumb first to bring the thumb towards the opposite hip. Okay, so that starts to, there's proprioception involved, it's multi-planar movement, and it starts to prepare, like I said, not just the elbow for that kind of stress, but the shoulder complex for those deceleration, acceleration mechanics. The second pattern is from the ground, and now, so you're gonna turn your back facing me actually. Yeah, there we go. And now you're gonna pull up. So opposite movement, he's starting thumb at the hip, and then he comes up and out. And he's always leading with the thumb as he comes up and as he releases back. I call this one taking the sword out. All right, so that's the easiest way to remember that one. Okay, so leading with the thumb is the cue. Thanks, Matt. And so all this stuff is stuff that the athlete can do on his own. So there's stuff you're gonna do in the clinic, and then the more you can give the athlete to do on their own, that provides the care that they need to have for the structure, is gonna provide better outcomes. Because even if they're coming into the clinic to see you twice a week, if they're doing this kind of stuff on a daily basis, that's gonna contribute to having a much better, quicker outcome for their rehab. So there you have it, guys. Part one, you have some elements to consider of the kinetic chain to make sure that you're not increasing that valgus stress at the elbow. And part two is just how do we optimize what we typically do post-op for the structure? How do we make that just a little bit better? And how do we give homework to our athletes so they're doing more